very good morning and welcome to Breakfast with Dan Walker and Louise Minchin.
Headlines for you at just gone 7 o'clock on this Monday morning. Labour are calling for next year's A-level and GCSE exams in England to be pushed back to help pupils cope with the impact of coronavirus.
The cost of plastic bags is to double to 10 pence and all shops in England will have to charge for them.
200 passengers on a flight from Zante are told to self-isolate after several tested positive for coronavirus. We'll talk to one of those who was on board.
Good morning. Knock for 66. Owen Morgan admits he's in the form of his life as his remarkable innings inspires England to a record-breaking victory over Pakistan in their second T20 international.
All that to come, but it's Monday the 31st of August and Labour are calling for next year's GCSE and A-level exams to be delayed to give pupils more time to try and catch up on the work they've missed because of the pandemic.
Yes, the party says students have a mountain to climb after months away from the classroom as a result of coronavirus. The government says it's working with the exams regulator on a plan for next year. Unions say the impact on university admissions also needs to be considered.
Well, it's an idea that's worthy of consideration. Our concerns about it are that if you're going to push the exam series back, you can't really push back the date for the publication of results because that would have a difficult knock-on effect for universities, colleges and employers.
And we'll be speaking to the Shadow Education Secretary, Kate Green, in just a few minutes' time here on Breakfast.
The charge on single-use carrier bags in England is to double from 5p to 10p from next April, and all shops will have to charge for them.
The government says it's part of a renewed drive to be greener and cut unnecessary waste. Our Chief Environment Correspondent Justin Rowlatt has the details.
At the moment, the 5p levy only applies to single-use carrier bags in large stores, those employing more than 250 people. But from next April, the charge will double and will apply in all shops. The government says the initiative aims to protect sea creatures by reducing plastic pollution in the ocean. It claims that since the charge was introduced in 2015, there has been a 95% reduction in plastic bag sales in major supermarkets. But environmental campaigners dispute that. They say we're just buying billions of thicker so-called bags for life instead. The environmental campaign group Greenpeace says the government should go further and set targets for reducing all single-use plastics by supermarkets.
This is just a small step when we should be taking big strides. We know the scale of our plastic pollution crisis. The government is well aware of the kind of action they need to take, including on things like bags for life, which contain more plastic. But ultimately, if we're going to be making people, customers, you or I, pay more, surely producers, the people who make the plastic in the first place, should be paying more as well. And that's what we want to see from the government as soon as possible.
But the move has been welcomed by the Association of Convenience Stores, which represents small retailers. It says the charge is an effective way of reducing plastic waste. Justin Rowlatt, BBC News.
All passengers on a flight to Wales from the Greek island of Zante have been told to self-isolate after some of those travelling tested positive for COVID-19. Almost 200 people were on board the plane, TUI plane. There have been 7 confirmed cases of the virus, with some other passengers reporting symptoms.
Secondary school pupils in Scotland must wear face coverings in corridors, communal spaces and on school buses from this morning. They won't have to wear them in classrooms. Similar measures are being introduced in Northern Ireland and parts of England. In Wales, individual head teachers will be able to decide whether they think face coverings are necessary.
Police say they'll do everything within their power to prosecute people who organise illegal raves. More than 3,000 attended an unlicensed music event on the edge of the Brecon Beacons this weekend, and 2 organisers have been since fined £10,000 each. In Norfolk, police were hit with bottles and cans. That's as they were trying to shut down a rave in Thetford Forest.
Just before we finish the news bulletin, and we're going to show you some pictures, astonishing pictures of a little girl being pulled into the air by a giant kite. You want to watch carefully. And also, let me tell you, she did suffer just minor cuts and bruises, which is quite something.
This was at a festival in Taiwan, and there she is. Look at that. It's a 3-year-old girl on the end of that kite, and she got tangled in it when it was on the floor and then thrown up into the air. She was eventually caught, thankfully, and as Louise said, just somehow minor cuts and bruises. It is being investigated by authorities in Taiwan.
Gosh, lucky escape. It's 6 minutes past 7. Let's get back to our main story this morning, that call from Labour for next year's GCSE and A-level exams to be pushed back.
Yeah, they say it would allow students to catch up with the work they've missed because of the pandemic. As promised, we're joined now by the Shadow Education Secretary, Kate Green. Good morning. Good to speak to you on the programme. Can you, first of all, explain exactly how it would work and why you think we need this delay in England for GCSEs and A-levels next year?
Well, we know that the students who are going into year 11 and year 13, the exam years in the next few days, have already had a lot of disruption to their education. And it is important that we take all the steps that we can to give them every chance when it comes to assessment of their performance next summer. And clearly, one way we can do that is to give them time for study, as much extension as possible, commensurate with obviously being able to run university and college admissions processes too. But we think it is possible to extend the exams back into June or even perhaps July to give those few extra weeks of study. Obviously, it's only one thing that you could do, and it won't be the only thing that will help those students recover from the disruption that their education has suffered already, and there may be more disruption if we have, for example, local lockdowns in the coming year. But it's so important that the government starts to make contingency plans now so we don't have a repeat of the fiasco that we saw just over the last few weeks in relation to this year's exam series. OK,
so you're saying potentially being pushed back into June or even into July. We've just heard from one head teacher talking about how that would knock on with issues for universities and college admissions. What is your way of getting round that? Would you try and keep the result date the same, or would that get pushed back as well?
I think it would be ideal not to have to push the results date back or not to have to push it back very far. But these plans do need to be worked through with examining bodies. What we are saying, though, is that our first priority must be to give the students every possible chance to demonstrate their learning, their attainment and their potential. And that absolutely ought to be the government's priority. Young people have never been front of mind when the government's been managing its way or failing to manage its way through this COVID crisis. And we think they need to be put first, and we need to build systems that give young people every chance and every opportunity to do well.
We've got a regular guest on this programme, Jeff Barton, who's of the Association of School and College Leaders. And one of the issues he says is that it would create more problems than it solves. And I think one of the things he was mentioning was, I know you say there's you want more of an understanding of the situation that young people are going through, but this could put a lot of pressure on markers, and many of those are teachers as well, in order to get those grades ready for results day and not cause a backlog in the system. Do you think there is, I suppose, teachers as well, in order to get those grades ready for results day and not cause a backlog in the system? Do you think there is, I suppose, are there enough resources to make sure that that time frame you're talking about would actually work?
Well, that is a very good question, and it will be really important that whatever the government decides to do, it underpins it with adequate resources. And of course, that does include having, as you say, enough people both to manage the exams and to mark them. But, you know, we've found money, quite rightly the government has found money to mitigate the other very damaging impacts of the coronavirus. The furlough scheme, for example, to keep people in work, absolutely the right thing to do. It always seems that when it comes to finding the resources to give young people every chance and every protection, the government just puts them to the back of the queue. And that really isn't acceptable. We've got to have young people in their futures as our absolute priority.
I'm sure you've seen that Ofqual are announcing that exam content for some subjects will be reduced. Is that a measure that could potentially help out in this area as well?
I think it's important that students perhaps have a wider choice in terms of what exam questions they can take, so that it may be that some students omit some parts of the curriculum. But in general, I don't think that shrinking the curriculum is the ideal solution, because for some young people it might mean, for example, that they miss out on studying a subject that they would have gone on into further post-school study and done really well in. They may be missing out on developing real expertise in a more complex and technical area, and we wouldn't want to shut students off from that opportunity. So I think there are ways we can look at making sure that students have more opportunity when it comes to taking exams to concentrate on subjects where they've got a detailed knowledge. But I do think it's less than ideal to start narrowing down the range of subjects that's available for study if that can be avoided.
OK, and just to let you know, I mean, I know you know this, the government have said that they are working closely with the sector and Ofqual as well and the exam boards to look at the approach. And Ofqual are consulting on this precise issue. So it could be they come back with a recommendation to push exams back anyway.
It could indeed, but they do need to make some relatively rapid progress because, first of all, teachers need to know the situation. They need to know the way in which the academic year will be run and how they should arrange teaching over the coming months. And also, it's so important that this year we have a credible plan for the exam series next year. We saw what happened last month when there was no plan, no contingency planning put in place at all. It was utter incompetence and chaos. We really need to know that the Ofqual and government plan this time round is going to be robust. It's going to deal with the possibility of further local lockdowns or what would happen if we couldn't have an exam series again next summer. The credibility of the government in relation to managing the exams process is very, very badly dented by the fiasco of the last few weeks. And that's why it's so important that they start the detailed planning now. And they do that with schools, with colleges and with the universities who will be relying on the results next summer.
Kate Green, appreciate your time. Thank you very much for talking to us.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.